building your financial foundation. A lot of people, they focus on all sorts of things, on investing or on spending money, but they never build their financial foundation. So when the unexpected things of life happen, they're not ready for it. And they don't have the foundation to build a financial future on top of. So tonight, I want to talk specifically about how to build that financial foundation. It's all kind of started with me when I read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. In there, it talked about set aside 10% of everything you ever make. I was great. What do I do with it? I set it aside. I put it in a bank account. It sits there. Then what? I had no clue what to do with it. I then read Financial Fitness and what's the subtitle? The Offense, Defense, and Playing Field of Personal Finance. And in there, they talked about what you do with the 10%. So let me dive a little bit into that. The core of the financial foundation is your emergency fund. Now, if there's a red line for your emergency fund, if it's below this certain amount, then top priority is getting it to above red line. So red line, a lot of industry gurus say it's $1,000. I'd say look at what a recent auto repair has cost you, or some other emergency that's hit you in the last couple of years that really kind of devastated you. That should be your red line, probably. I think a lot of people are closer to $1,500, $2,000, but it depends on your situation. And so if you're below whatever your red line is, then the idea is you need to do whatever it takes. So all 10% of that 10% goes into building emergency fund. All right. Then if you have debts, then make minimum payments on your debts, and anything you can scrape out of your budget goes to your emergency fund. The idea is everything is focused on getting that emergency fund above the red line before you do anything else, before you focus on paying down debt, before you build your financial foundation. None of that is important until you have your above red line on your emergency fund, because the next time an emergency hits, boom, suddenly you're paying 20% interest on your emergency, which may turn something that could have been an inconvenience into a catastrophe. So get your above red line on your emergency fund is the top thing to do. So after you get your emergency fund above red line, that 10% of everything you make then starts going into four different areas, four different layers of your financial foundation. The first one being a skills account, investing in your ability to be valuable in society. If money is a receipt for value added to society, then becoming more valuable to society allows you to make more money. So of that 10%, 4% of that income, after you've gone above red line on your emergency fund, 4% of that should go towards your skills account until you get to the maximum for that skills account. So maximum for a skills account is look at every certification, training, course, book, audio program, conference, seminar, coaching. Look at all those and see what you could reasonably do in the next 2 years. Like if you were to focus and all these were available and they'd all make sense for you, what could you reasonably do in 2 years? And that's kind of your goal, is to get enough so that you can take whatever means necessary to upgrade your skills to make yourself more valuable. So that's what this account is for, is building a war chest of funds that lets you become more valuable in society, command more income. So that's the first layer of your financial foundation after you've gone above red line emergency fund. 4% of your income, every time you get paid, goes into your skills account until you've got enough for 2 years. And then we'll talk about what happens after that. The next layer is your emergency fund. So you start out with your red line, which is $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, whatever you determine red line is. You're above red line. So now 3% of your income goes into your emergency fund until you reach its max. Emergency fund max is somewhere between 3 months and a year, depending on your circumstances. It's really if you lost all the income in your household how long would it take you to get back to that income, how to build that income back up? So if you have two people working in the household and they both lost their job at the same time, how long would it take for you to get both those jobs back, to find another job for both people? How much, if you lost all active income in the household, how long would it take you to replenish that income, to get that income back? So there's that part of it. And now for business owners, it's slightly different. Business owners, I recommend 12 months, because if the market makes a dramatic move, or if there's some government law or legislation or regulation that suddenly dramatically impacts your business, you need 12 months to pivot your business without worrying about where the next meal is coming from. So emergency fund for business owners is more like 12 months, but for employees, typically 3 to 12 months, depending on your circumstances and how hard it would be to find employment again or replace that income. So 4% for your skills fund, 3% for emergency fund, 2% for emergency preparation fund. Now, the emergency preparation fund is meant for preparing yourself for the times where money won't do you any good. So, for instance, here in Texas, where I live, we had the big freeze a few years ago, where we had unexpected snow, we lost power and water for a week, and it didn't matter how much money you had, you couldn't get anything. Stores were all closed, everything was closed. So the idea is have enough stuff on hand that you can survive those things where money won't do you any good. And so the emergency preparation fund, you put 2% in there until it reaches its max. And the idea is you have enough funds that when you realize, oh, I don't have enough of whatever to last me through when money wouldn't do me any good. So this would be food, this would be heat or cooling, this would be medicines, first aid type stuff. So have enough that you could replenish and get up to maybe a week, a month, maybe even 3 months, so you could survive something happening and you being able to go without being able to use money. Once you get to say enough that you feel like, okay, yeah, if something comes up, I can handle it. I've got enough money for topping off whatever food supplies or medicine or whatever I need. Then that would be your maximum. You get to that, and then that's done for emergency preparation. And then you look at it, 10% of everything you make is supposed to go in your foundation. We got 4% into skills, 3% in emergency fund, 2% into emergency preparation, and the last 1% goes into retirement, is what people typically call it. I call it your wealth foundation. So this is where you're putting something in aside for a future you that maybe can't work or that can't actively provide income for some reason. So it's kind of a super emergency fund. If it gets big enough, it can be, you can retire before that point. But the idea is that you have this emergency fund for a time where you aren't where you are now physically, and you may not be able to provide for yourself. So 1% goes in there. And people say 1%, but I got to get my match. My match is, I got to put 3% in to get my match. Well, hold on. We'll get there. So 10% of your income goes into this foundation. And anything else you can carve out of your budget goes towards paying off debt. Once you've paid off all your debts, you have no expected debts in the future, no education that you're going to pay for, no home you're going to buy. Once everything's paid off and you've got no future expectation of debt, then you can start taking that money and putting it in your foundation and making your foundation even bigger, because your expenses will be next to nothing if you have no debt. But at the start, carve out everything you can to pay off debt, and then 10% of everything you make is locked into this foundation. Then as you reach as each of these accounts gets to the point where they're maxed out, where it gets to, your skills account, I've got enough funds, I could get all the courses and training and certifications I could possibly do in 2 years. Great. That now drops down to just a trickle, maybe, $50, $100, $10, something, but there's a little bit going in there automatically every month instead of the full 4%. And then the rest of that money then flows up into the emergency fund. So now the emergency fund may have 7% going into it until it reaches its 3 months or 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. So once that maxes out, then that rolls up usually emergency preparation is taken care of before then. Emergency preparation would roll back down. Once you got enough funds that you could comfortably sustain your food supply and your medicine and household, maintain your household for whatever period of time you determined, then that just gets a trickle as well. And then that might flow into your emergency fund. So now you've got, 8% going into your emergency fund. That should help speed it along, getting it to where it needs to be. Once you reach your goal of emergency fund and all three of the others are done, everything rolls up into retirement. This is where you might have a little bit trickling into skills account, a little bit trickling into your emergency fund, a little bit trickling into your emergency preparation. And the bulk of that money now is rolled up and goes into your retirement fund. And that's where, well, you not only got your match, you got a lot more. So that might go into your, now, not everyone has a 401k or match. It could go into an individual retirement account. It could go into a solo 401k, or if you're working with someone, there's other 401k type programs. But the idea is you put it in some sort of tax advantage growth where the taxes won't prevent the growth of the investment. Or if you're averse to investment, you could put it aside in a high yield savings account. Not completely opposed to that. That's better than nothing. So either way, that's the kind of plan here. So 10% of everything you make goes into the foundation. You fill in your skills war chest. You fill in your emergency fund. You fill in your emergency preparation and have some set aside for the future. And then as you start reaching the goals for each of those layers, it all rolls up and eventually starts filling into everything going into retirement. And then if you pay off your debt and it grows, then you're putting a lot more in. Now, some people say, well, what happens if I use some of that skills account? Well, then drop back down. 4% of your income now goes into the skills account till it gets back up, and then it goes back to investments or retirement. And so the idea is that you always have funds available to take care of making yourself more valuable. If an emergency happens, it's just an inconvenience, and you're always able to prepare yourselves for the time when money won't help you at all. And so building this financial foundation gives you peace of mind. It lets you focus on what's really important. So you're not having to constantly worry about how am I going to pay the credit card off? I've got this emergency, the water heater blew, the tire is flat, engine won't start. You don't worry about those kind of things because, oh, well, automatic. Okay, I just pull from my emergency fund, and then I start putting 7% back in my emergency fund until it's replenished. Once it's replenished, it goes back into retirement. And it's a whole system that makes it so you don't have to lose focus on what you're really supposed to be doing. What I often tell people is the purpose of getting good with money is not to get good with money. The purpose of getting good with money is to get money out of the way so you can focus on what's important. We don't want you focusing on just how do I get the most money possible? We want you focusing on whatever you can uniquely do. What is something that you feel you're called to do and take care of? And we don't want money getting in the way of that. So the whole purpose of getting good with money is to build your foundation so you can focus on what's important, and money does not distract you from that.